The afternoon sun, a sterile white light, poured through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls of the Atherton mansion, glinting off the polished steel and white marble that dominated every surface. The house was less a home and more a monument to success, an architectural marvel of minimalism that felt as cold and empty as a museum after hours. Silence was the primary occupant here, a heavy, oppressive presence that swallowed the sound of footsteps and muted the hum of the state-of-the-art climate control. Everything was in its place, perfectly curated and devoid of life. It was a space designed to be admired from a distance, a pristine showcase of wealth that offered no comfort, no warmth, no sanctuary for the heart. This was the world Arthur had built, a kingdom of glass and stone, where emotion was an unwelcome and messy intruder. He walked in earlier than usual, the soft click of the magnetic lock on the front door sounding like a gunshot in the stillness. His custom-tailored suit felt like armor, a uniform he rarely shed, but it offered no defense against the scene that awaited him in the main living area. His wife, Jessica, stood with her back rigid, her voice a sharp, venomous instrument cutting through the silence. She was addressing Maria, the housekeeper, who stood calmly, her calloused hands clasped before her. An open, empty velvet box lay on the white marble coffee table between them, a dark void in the otherwise immaculate room. Arthur saw the accusation in his wife's posture before he even heard the words, a familiar tension that had been simmering just beneath the surface of their carefully managed lives for months. "A $50,000 diamond bracelet," Jessica spat, the words echoing with a cruel clarity in the cavernous space. "But did you honestly believe I wouldn't notice it was gone? After everything we do for you?" Maria remained silent, her gaze serene and unwavering, fixed on a point just past Jessica's shoulder. She did not flinch, nor did she protest. Her dignity was a quiet shield against the onslaught. But Arthur's focus was instantly pulled away from the two women, drawn to a small, trembling figure by the window. It was his daughter, Lily. She was 7 years old. Her designer dress a stark contrast to the raw, primal fear that radiated from her small frame. Her sweet face was pale, and her large, expressive eyes were wide with a terror that seemed too immense for her little body to contain. Before Arthur could speak, before his mind could even begin to assemble the facts, Lily acted. With a choked sob, she ran. She didn't run to him. Her father, the man who was supposed to be her protector. She scrambled across the cold, unforgiving floor and threw herself at Maria, clinging to the housekeeper's legs with a desperate strength. She buried her face in the simple fabric of Maria's uniform, her body shaking with silent, gut-wrenching sobs. Then she peeked out, her gaze locking not with the woman she sought comfort from, but with the woman who caused her pain. She looked at her stepmother, Jessica, with an expression of pure, unadulterated terror. In that single, heartbreaking moment, the entire foundation of Arthur's world crumbled. The real crime wasn't a missing bracelet, it was the fear in his daughter's eyes. It's overwhelming to witness a truth so raw, it changes everything. And if this story resonates with you, please consider subscribing. It allows us to continue bringing these powerful, life-altering moments to light. The weight of Lily's small body, trembling against Maria's legs, was an anchor in the swirling chaos of Arthur's mind. He moved then, not with the sharp, decisive energy of the boardroom, but with a slow, deliberate caution he hadn't felt in years. He knelt, his expensive suit creasing on the cold marble, and gently pried his daughter's hands free. When he lifted her into his arms, she didn't resist. She collapsed against him, her sobs muffled against his shoulder. He looked over her head at Jessica, his wife, whose face was a mask of indignant rage. Then he looked at Maria, whose calm expression held no fear, only a profound, silent sorrow for the child. In that moment, Arthur made a choice. He ignored the missing bracelet, the accusation, and his wife's fury. He simply held his daughter and walked away from the scene, leaving the two women standing in a chasm of unspoken hostility. He carried Lily to her room, a space designed by a famous interior decorator to be a child's paradise, but which now felt like another cold exhibit. He sat with her on the edge of her bed, surrounded by designer dolls and educational toys that were rarely touched. He tried to soothe her, murmuring soft words, but they felt foreign and clumsy on his tongue. He was a man who commanded thousands, who shaped markets with his vision, yet he was utterly powerless to mend the terror in his own child. A ghost of a memory surfaced. His first wife, Sarah, lying in a hospital bed, making him promise to always protect their little girl. He had promised. He had sworn it, and as he looked around the lavish, empty room and felt the distance between himself and his trembling daughter, he was consumed by the sickening realization that he had broken that sacred vow. He remembered Maria's arrival 2 years prior. After a string of nannies who saw Lily's Down syndrome as a chore, Maria had entered their lives like a quiet breath of fresh air. She never spoke much, but she saw everything. She saw how Lily struggled to communicate her frustrations and how she lit up when someone took the time to understand her world. Arthur had watched, from a detached distance, as his daughter formed an unbreakable bond with the housekeeper. He'd seen Lily run to Maria for comfort after a scraped knee, and he'd heard them sharing soft giggles in the kitchen. He had filed these moments away as a convenience, a sign that his household was running smoothly. He never once considered that Lily was running to Maria because she was running away from something else. He had mistaken a lifeline for a luxury. Later that evening, the confrontation with Jessica was brief and chillingly civil. Arthur found her in their master suite, the picture of a grieved innocence. He told her they would suspend the investigation into the bracelet indefinitely. Her fury was immediate. She accused him of undermining her, of taking the side of the staff over his own wife. But Arthur's voice was devoid of emotion, a flat, sterile tone that unnerved her more than any shouting match could. He simply stated that his priority was Lily's emotional state, and the subject was closed. Jessica stared at him, her eyes narrowing with suspicion and contempt. She saw the shift in him, the new, unreadable focus in his gaze, and for the first time since their wedding day, she seemed to understand that she was no longer in control of the narrative she had so carefully constructed within the walls of their home. Sleep offered no escape. Arthur sat in the pale glow of his computer screen in his home office, the silence of the mansion pressing in on him. He replayed the scene from the afternoon over and over, but his focus was solely on Lily. It wasn't just fear he had seen in her eyes. It was a learned terror, the kind that comes from repeated exposure to a threat. He finally allowed himself to connect the dots he had so conveniently ignored for months. Lily's sudden regressions in her speech therapy, her newfound shyness around guests, her quiet, withdrawn behavior. He had attributed it all to her condition, to the ebb and flow of her development. The truth was far more monstrous. He had provided a palace, but he had allowed a dragon to guard its gates, and his daughter was its prisoner. The weight of his negligence was a physical pain in his chest. He knew he couldn't rely on words or accusations. Jessica was a master of manipulation, capable of twisting any situation to her advantage. He needed irrefutable proof, a truth that couldn't be denied or spun. This was the moment his internal world shifted, the father finally overriding the CEO. He opened a new browser tab and began his research, his fingers flying across the keyboard with renewed purpose. He searched for the most advanced, discreet home surveillance systems, the kind used in high-stakes corporate espionage. He would turn his cold, sterile home into a fortress of observation. It's a terrifying thing to realize you have to spy on your own life to find the truth. And if you've ever faced a moment where you had to do something difficult to protect someone you love, please consider subscribing. Your support allows us to continue sharing these critical stories of personal courage. The installation was completed within 2 days, disguised as a routine security network upgrade. A team of trusted professionals worked silently and efficiently, placing nearly invisible microcameras in every common area of the house. During this time, the atmosphere in the mansion grew thick with unspoken tension. Jessica became a performer, her every interaction with Lily a saccharine display of affection whenever Arthur was in the room. She would read stories in an overly animated voice or try to initiate games that Lily clearly had no interest in, all while casting sidelong glances at Arthur, seeking his approval. Lily, in turn, became even more withdrawn, a small, silent ghost in her own home, her only moments of peace found in the quiet, unassuming presence of Maria, who continued her duties as if nothing had happened. Maria's steadfast dignity became a source of quiet strength for Arthur. She never once complained or defended herself. Her focus remained solely on Lily's well-being. Arthur would watch from his office window as Maria and Lily tended to the small herb garden outside the kitchen. He saw the patient way Maria guided Lily's small hands, the genuine smiles they shared over a newly sprouted basil leaf, the easy, comfortable silence between them. These were moments of pure, unadulterated affection, a currency that had been all but banished from the rest of the house. He realized Maria wasn't just a housekeeper. She was the keeper of his daughter's heart, the only person who had consistently shown her the unconditional love she so desperately needed and deserved. He had been paying her to clean his house, when all along she had been saving his child. The first time he sat down to review the footage, his hands trembled. He fast-forwarded through hours of empty rooms and silent corridors until he found them. Jessica and Lily, alone in the playroom. The audio was crystal clear. He watched as Lily struggled to stack a set of blocks, her small hands fumbling. Jessica's initial encouragement quickly soured into irritation. "No, not like that," she snapped, her voice a harsh whisper. "Abby, why can't you ever get it right?" She then took the block from Lily's hand and deliberately knocked over the tower. Lily didn't cry. She just stared at the fallen blocks with a look of weary resignation that was utterly heartbreaking in a 7-year-old. Arthur felt a hot, sickening wave of shame and anger wash over him. He spent the next few nights poring over the recordings, each clip a fresh stab of guilt. He saw Jessica telling Lily that her drawings were messy and ugly. He saw her taking away a favorite snack, claiming Lily didn't deserve it for some minor, imagined infraction. He heard her mocking the way Lily pronounced certain words, a cruel imitation that made the little girl fall silent for the rest of the day. It was a campaign of 1,000 tiny cuts, a systematic dismantling of a child's self-worth, all happening under his roof while he was busy closing deals and building an empire. He had been so focused on providing for his daughter's future that he had completely failed to protect her present. The man who could predict market trends with stunning accuracy had been completely blind to the emotional tragedy unfolding in his own home. Armed with this devastating knowledge, he decided to confront Jessica, but not with the full force of his evidence. It was a strategic probe, a way to gauge her reaction. During a quiet dinner, he casually mentioned that she seemed to be under a lot of stress lately, particularly with Lily. The reaction was instantaneous and explosive. Jessica launched into a tirade, playing the victim with breathtaking skill. She accused him of being an absent, ungrateful husband, of having no idea how challenging it was to care for a child like Lily. She painted a picture of herself as a long-suffering saint, sacrificing her own happiness for his special daughter. She was daring him to challenge her, confident in her ability to control the narrative, completely unaware that her every word was sealing her own fate. Her performance was flawless, but Arthur was no longer part of her audience. He listened calmly, his face an unreadable mask, but inside, a cold, hard resolve was solidifying into steel. Her words, intended to shame him into submission, did the opposite. They erased any lingering doubt, any shred of empathy he might have had for her. He now saw with perfect clarity that Jessica didn't just dislike her role as a stepmother. She resented his daughter's very existence. This was no longer a marriage in crisis. It was a battle for his daughter's soul. He would not show his hand yet. He would continue to gather his evidence, building an airtight case, not for a divorce lawyer, but for the complete and total protection of Lily. He would let Jessica believe she was winning, right up until the moment he took everything from her. He arranged the final conversation in the same cavernous living room where the nightmare had begun. The afternoon light was just as sterile, the white marble just as cold. Arthur sat on one of the minimalist sofas, his posture relaxed, a stark contrast to the coiled tension within him. He had asked Jessica to discuss the terms of their separation, and she had walked in with an air of triumphant negotiation, her lawyers having already assured her she held a strong position. She saw Arthur not as a grieving father, but as a business rival in a hostile takeover, and she was confident in her assets, his perceived absence and her feigned martyrdom. She sat opposite him, a predatory stillness in her eyes, ready to list her demands, completely oblivious to the fact that the meeting was a formality, a stage set for a conclusion he had already written. Arthur began not with accusations, but with quiet, devastating observations. He spoke of Lily's recent night terrors, of the way she would flinch if a voice was raised even slightly. He described, in clinical detail, how she had stopped trying to stack her favorite blocks, as if she had already accepted the inevitability of failure. He never mentioned the cameras. He framed it all as things he had finally started to notice. Jessica listened, her initial confidence wavering, replaced by a defensive fury. She launched into a well-rehearsed performance, a tirade about his ignorance, his ingratitude, and the immense, thankless burden of raising a child with special needs. She painted him as the villain, the distant patriarch who had no idea of the daily sacrifices she made on his family's altar. It was a masterful, manipulative display, but for the first time, her words had no power over him. His calm was the one thing she hadn't prepared for. It was a mirror reflecting her own ugliness back at her, and she couldn't stand it. Her voice escalated, cracking with genuine, venomous rage. "You have no idea," she shrieked, the sound echoing off the cold glass walls. "And you think it's easy taking care of that girl? She's a burden, a constant, draining weight. I did what I had to do to get some order out of her. Someone had to teach her that this world isn't going to coddle her just because she's different. If you had been here, if you had been a father instead of just a bank, maybe you would understand that." In her desperate attempt to wound him, she had handed him the sword, confessing to a cruelty she mistook for discipline, a hatred she disguised as tough love. A heavy silence fell in the aftermath of her outburst. Jessica was breathing heavily, her face flushed with a mixture of anger and self-righteousness, still believing she had won the argument. Arthur didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply looked at her, and in his gaze there was no anger, only a vast, empty pity. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he reached for his phone, which had been sitting on the marble coffee table between them the entire time. He tapped the screen once, and the small red icon of the voice recorder vanished. He didn't need to say a word. He just held the phone up for a fraction of a second before placing it back down. The color drained from Jessica's face as the truth crashed down upon her. The performance was over. The mask had not just fallen, it had been pulverized. In that moment, Arthur was no longer the passive CEO who had outsourced his heart. He was a father. He was a lion. He spoke, and his voice was quiet but carried the weight of an unbreakable vow. "You will pack a bag," he said, the words clear and final. "You will leave this house tonight. You will sign whatever papers my lawyer puts in front of you, and you will never, ever see Lily again. This is not a negotiation. There was no room for argument, no opening for manipulation. He had finally stepped out of the shadows of his own making to stand guard over his daughter's life. Witnessing a parent finally reclaim their sacred duty is a powerful testament to love's ultimate victory. If you believe in the power of these transformations, please subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to tell stories that matter. The legal proceedings were swift and silent, an extension of the quiet justice Arthur had sought. Armed with the irrefutable recording, his lawyers ensured Jessica was removed from their lives with surgical precision, facing legal consequences for her actions that went far beyond a simple, lucrative divorce settlement. But the most profound transformation wasn't recorded in any court document. It occurred within the glass and steel walls of the Atherton mansion. The oppressive silence was the first casualty, replaced by the tentative, then joyful sounds of a child finally free to be herself. Arthur, true to his new purpose, immediately redefined Maria's role. He sat with her in the kitchen, not as an employer to an employee, but as one grateful human being to another, and formally offered her the position of Lily's governess and primary caregiver, a partner in raising his daughter. The six-figure salary was a formality. The true compensation was the status she had already earned: family. Slowly, miraculously, the museum began to feel like a home. Lily's colorful, wonderfully imperfect drawings were taped to the pristine white walls, their vibrant chaos a joyful rebellion against the years of cold, calculated minimalism. Laughter, once a foreign sound, now echoed down the long corridors, chasing away the ghosts of fear and neglect. Arthur reorganized his entire professional life, delegating vast responsibilities and trading late-night market analyses for afternoons in the garden with Lily and Maria. He was learning the unique language of his daughter, a dialect not of words, but of shared glances, gentle touches, and the quiet understanding that blossomed in shared activities. He discovered the mischievous twinkle in her eyes when she successfully hid a garden trowel, and the pure, uninhibited joy of her dance to a favorite song. He was no longer just providing for her, he was finally present with her. 3 years later, Arthur stood on a brightly lit stage, the sterile white of his former life replaced by the warm, inviting colors of a new beginning. Beside him, a confident, smiling Lily held his hand tightly, her other hand interwoven with Maria's. They were at the inauguration of the Lily Foundation, an organization Arthur had created and funded to provide comprehensive support, resources, and advocacy for families with children with Down syndrome. As he looked out at the crowd of families, caregivers and supporters, his voice, once sharp with corporate authority, was now soft with humility and profound gratitude. For most of my life, I believed my greatest assets were tracked on the stock market, he said, his gaze falling lovingly on his daughter. But Lily taught me that true wealth is measured in love, in patience, and in the courage to truly see the person standing right in front of you. She is my greatest teacher, my hero, and my heart. The speech ended not with a thunderous applause, but with a wave of quiet, profound emotion that rippled through the audience. Arthur knelt, and Lily threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder in a hug that was pure love, completely devoid of any fear. He held her close, the promise he made to her mother years ago finally, truly fulfilled. Maria looked on, her serene smile radiating a warmth that filled the entire stage, a silent guardian who had held their world together with her quiet, unwavering strength. Their small circle was a powerful testament to the idea that a family isn't built from contracts or convenience, but from the unwavering commitment to protect and cherish one another. Stories like this remind us of what truly matters, and by subscribing, you help us continue to share these powerful accounts of love's incredible power to heal and rebuild.